Okay, so we're going to talk just a little bit on a high level about how to walk through our terminal, how to use it, just really the base commands. We're not going to talk a ton about it, but we are going to talk about a few things. So here, all I did was open my terminal, and this is what it came up as. Does anybody know what this is, or what this would be called? This is like my path, right? So this is the way, or this is where I'm currently at. You can think about it as the terminal is just a way that I can navigate through my computer. I can navigate through different folders and files and seeing if things are there. I can do that through like clicking on folders and clicking on things, or I can use my terminal and I can navigate the same way. So it's another way to do it. It's really popular within development because if you get in any sort of cloud or virtual machine stuff, you don't often have some sort of visual representation. You have to do everything through a terminal. So that's why I really suggest you guys get familiar with this, because with your job, you're likely going to have to use the terminal for different aspects. If you're pulling stuff from the cloud or even just bringing in code that is there, usually they don't, aren't going to have, sometimes there's graphical user interfaces or GUIs that you can just click on, but sometimes you have to actually use the terminal. So I'd really encourage you guys to get you familiar with it. This is my path. So this is saying where I am at. Now, in the same way that if I'm just on my desktop and I have a bunch of folders, this isn't my main screen, so you don't see any folders, but let's pretend I had a bunch of folders here. Here I'm on my desktop and I have access to all those folders, and that's what I can see, right? I can't see what's in those folders yet. If I wanted to, I'd have to click into that folder and then it opens it up, right? And then I can, if there's another folder in it, I have to click on it and then it opens it up. The same thing happens when we're dealing with our terminal. So for me right now, if I say ls, again, this is on a Mac. If you have a Windows and you have git bash, you can do these commands. If not, then if you're using like PowerShell or command prompt, it is different. I believe it's dir for you guys. But this just says this is where things are currently at, or this is what I have access to. So right now I have access. I'm at a high level. I'm just at my user, right? And so I'm not even on my desktop yet. I have access to all this stuff, for different stuff, a VirtualBox for virtual machines. I've got different folders, different projects, primary keys. I got a whole bunch of stuff here. For some reason, I have node modules. I should delete that. But I have access to my desktop. So if I want to go from my user to my desktop directory, I'm going to change my directory. So that is CD. CD stands for change directory. And so that is saying, hey, I want to get out of where I currently am and I want to go here. So I want to go into my desktop. So I'm going to say DESK. Now, please note that for, at least for Mac, it is case sensitive. Sometimes I've seen for Windows it work and sometimes it doesn't work. So I don't know exactly. Obviously, I'm not a Windows person, but it is case sensitive. And so if I just said desktop here, it doesn't work. Now, one thing that I like to do because I'm lazy and don't want to type everything is if you start typing on your terminal and you see something or you get to something that's unique, right? So right now, if I just say capital D, I've got a couple things that it could be, right? It could be my desktop, documents, or downloads. I can tab and it's going to say, hey, you've basically filtered it out and it could be one of these three things, but it's too generic. I don't know what you're wanting to say. Now, if I were to say, let's say that I do that. Now you can see that it no longer applies to desktop, but it's still not unique enough. But if I didn't want to go to desktop, I can just tab. And because that is unique, because there's nothing else that starts with a capital D and then is followed by an E, it will automatically complete that for me. So, as you get used to it, as you're typing, you can say like CD desktop and it gets just much faster, especially if you understand your pathways and you understand where that's going. So now you see that I have changed my directory. I'm no longer just in my user. I'm now in my actual desktop. And if I run the same tool of ls or dir, if you're on Windows, you can now see everything you have access to. So I'm the type of kid that, just threw everything in their backpack, lots of files. In high school or in middle school, you just threw loose papers down there. I was that kid. And so obviously my desktop is not the most neat. I'm just going to be blunt and honest. Lots of screenshots, lots of all that good stuff. But you can see that what I have access to. It's like I double clicked, I'm on my desktop, and now it's all my folders. Cool. So I know that I've got a folder called Coding Dojo. So I'm going to CD into Coding Dojo. Now I made a space between for my folder between Coding Dojo, I had a space. So that's why we have this escape character here that's saying, hey, let's count this as one thing, but there is a space. So just basically forget that space, like avoid that or don't worry about it. So I'm in Coding Dojo. Now you see it goes from desktop to Coding Dojo. And if I want to see exactly what my path is, I say, what is my present working directory? So PWD. And that's going to say that I went from users. That's where we started in William Calhoun. That's where we started. Then I went into my desktop. From my desktop, I went into my folder of Coding Dojo. Cool. So now I know that I have something called instruction in here. And this is just as you do this, you're going to get more familiar and you're going to understand your pathways on your own computer. And so again, I ls and I say, okay, I've got a couple different things. I have our class of MERN. I've got all my old classes from 2023, 2022, 2021. Like I have a whole bunch of stuff, one-off lectures, whole bunch of stuff, but here's our class. So again, I want to CD into Nove, but you see that it's not unique enough because I have a Nove underscore Python and a Nove underscore MERN. So I just need to type one letter that's going to make it unique. It follows through. And then now I can see, okay, I'm in week 1. Okay, here we are. So I can CD one more time into week 1, ls. And then now I have our first VEET, which is what we're going to do today. I've got a lecture 2 and a lecture 1. Cool. So if I wanted to go into lecture 2, I could do that. I just, again, change directory into lecture. Let's say I wanted to do 2, but I accidentally did 1. Okay, I'm in the wrong directory. Does anybody know how I could go back just 1? What's the way that I could go back 1? I wanted to get out of this directory backwards. Yeah, exactly. It's CD ... CD space ... that says, hey, go back 1. Let's say I wanted to go back 2. Does anybody know how I could go back 2? Or 3 or 4 or kind of it's the same sort of process. Let's say I wanted to go way back, right? Let's say I went into lecture 1 and I'm like, yo, I'm in the wrong thing. I could do CD space ... that goes back 1 slash ... that'll go back 2 slash ... that'll go back 3. And you can just keep doing that. If you know, like I'm 4 ways in, I need to go back. And you see we're all the way back to instruction CD. I went from lecture 1 to week 1 to November 2023, November 23 to instruction CD. So I went back 3 spaces. So let's CD back into November MERN. No, oops. It was case sensitive. I don't know if you saw that, but MERN for me is capital E. I had it as a lowercase e, and it didn't know what that was, right? So it is case sensitive. And then let's do CD into lecture or week 1. And then CD into lecture 2. Cool. Again, if I say ls, we can see what do we have access to? Our office hour file, our main.js, and our class overview markdown file. Awesome. Now let's say I did all this and I wanted to go back to the beginning. I could do CD space ... slash ... slash. I could do all that, or I could do CD tilde. The tilde is this little sideways, the little squiggly, basically a squiggly minus sign. It's on your keyboard. It's on the top left, right above the tab. There should be like the back tick and then the tilde. And so that will take me back to the very beginning, where if I say ls, we're back to where we started. So that'll take you back to the beginning of that. Okay. Now, that was a lot of CDing. That was a lot of going one by one, and you don't have to do that. Let's say that you know your pathways. Well, you could just say CD, desktop, Coding Dojo, instruction, Nove, MERN, week 1, lecture 2. And by doing it all and just putting the pathway that way, and that's why I like that tab because it'll do it for me. Instead of having to say CD desktop, CD coding dojo, CD instruction CD, CD Nov MERN 2023, CD week 1, see all that. I can just do one and then add that pathway there. Cool. Let's go back. Now let's say that I want to make, and we can make tomorrow's lecture. We'll just make the folder for tomorrow. Well, what we can do is say CD, or sorry, not CD. We can say mkdir. Now that means make a directory that's creating a new folder for me. And I could say lecture 3. Now, if I say ls, we see that I now have this new directory of lecture 3. And if I go back, let's say that in NovMern, I wanted to create, weeks 1 or weeks 2 and 3. What I can do is, instead of having to say mkdir, week 2, and then enter mkdir week 3, I can just do week 3, just have a space in between them. And then now if I say ls, it'll create multiple directories. So you can do this where you can create multiple instead of having to keep doing mkdir. So now I have a couple different folders, or what we call directories, available to me. I don't have anything in there, but we have access to those. So let's CD into week 1, lecture 3. We see that if I say ls, nothing comes up because that's an empty folder for me. And so what I can do is I can create the file by saying touch, class overview. That's what I always call it. .md main.js. It's the same way that if I do mkdir space folder name space folder name, I can do the same thing. This creates a file. I can say create a new file, not a folder, but a file. Here's the file name and the type. This .md stands for markdown file. Space main.js is saying create a JavaScript file for me. So if I run this, then I ls, then all of a sudden I can see those ones for me. Now, I can do this keyword called code space dot. And what that's going to do is that is going to bring up VS Code for me. You can see it's opening VS Code. And right where I'm at, I was at lecture 3. And so what it does is it brings up my code for lecture 3. Right? It brings up all of my files there. Now, if you are on a Windows, this is by default. This is built in because VS Code is owned by Microsoft. Microsoft owns Windows, so of course they make it much easier. If you don't have one, if you've got a MacBook or you've got something that's running on Linux, you can do Command-Shift-P. Command-Shift-P. And then what this is going to do is it's going to bring up this, and I can type in shell command, code command, and install code command and path. I click that. And then now once you either refresh your terminal or you just kind of the next time you use it. So if you close it and open it back up, then all of a sudden you can use code, the code keyword. Now this space dot means all. Like I want to open everything within this lecture 3. Right, within this folder, which is all I have access to is this file or this file. If I say space dot, that means open up everything, open up the entire folder within VS Code. Now I don't have to do that. I could just do, let's say I was just working on the JavaScript. I already finished the class overview. I could say code space main.js. And now, instead of it opening up, where's it out here? Oh, I have a open on another screen. But now because I had VS Code open, it came and it opened up this file. So let's actually close this. Okay, now let's try it again. And instead of having to type, I can just use my keys to go up and down, and it's what are the previous ones I've run. So that way you don't have to do that again. So now if I say code main.js, of course, my VS Code is going to start bouncing. Trying to see what it needs. Who knows? Open on my other screen. Okay. I don't know what's happening. I don't know why it's opening that. VS Code's acting funny. It's acting up for sure. But just trust me, it will if you do this. Let's see if now maybe it works. I don't know what's going on. I just uploaded it or upgraded it, so I don't know what's going on. Okay, now you see. Who knows why it was doing that, but you can see that it just opens up specifically that file versus the folder. And so you don't have a folder, you just have that file that you can do something, right? That you can start working on. And it's distinguishing that, hey, this file specifically, if you have multiple main.js's, this one lives in week 1, lecture 3 main.js. So that's like a quick little, we like little shortcuts. Okay. What else can I show you guys? The last thing I do want to show you is let's go back. Let's say that I wanted to remove a folder. Now, this is going to be really common, especially if you're working with node modules. We're going to delete node modules a lot. You should always sort of delete them. We're going to talk about those today in class. But let's say I wanted to delete a file or a folder. Sorry, this is specifically a folder. Let's say I want to delete this week 3. Let's pretend that this is my node modules or this is my week 3. I could just, first off, I'm going to say clear. And that kind of, it doesn't delete everything. It just kind of puts it, makes it new. So if you're feeling overwhelmed, like I sort of was, then you're good to go. But I just say, I'm in Nov MERN. So if I say, okay, great, I have access to week 3. That's what I want to delete. I make sure I'm in the folder that has access to it first. Then I say rm space rf, and then I say week 3. Perfect. Now I say ls, and you can see I no longer have week 3 here. It's now just week 1 and week 2. I've removed that folder. And then if I ever wanted to make it again, I could say mkdir. Are there any, I'm going to pause there. Are there any questions on what we just did? I know that was a lot of stuff, but is there any questions on that? That makes sense. Because you put a 1 in the chat if that makes sense. Put a 0 if it did not, if you were confused. Cool. Awesome. This is going to be your best friend. If you guys can get used to this, I would encourage you. It's going to feel uncomfortable. I hated it when I first learned how to code. But it becomes really, really, really helpful, especially if you're working on virtual machines or you're working on somebody else's computer. If you're trying to navigate through some stuff, sometimes, again, they're called GUIs or graphical user interfaces, basically things that you can just click on, a visual representation of this. Sometimes those get weird or don't work and you have to get into the weeds. It's really good to know that. And you can make them custom too. So what I like to do is you can look into this. I won't talk a ton about it, but especially for bash, which is what this does, or this is technically ZSH, but you can create a file like a ZSHRC, and then you can do some fun things with it. Like I created a bunch of shortcuts. So I got really tired of having to say mkdir, the file name, and then cd, the file name or the folder name. So I just made this function here called mkcd, and that runs this. And then once that's done, it runs this. And so if let's say I wanted to do the week 3, I wanted to create week 3 and then navigate into it, I could just say mkcd week 3. And then now you see that I'm in week 3. And if I ls, or sorry, and then ls, now you see that I created that folder week 3, and then I cd'd into it automatically. So you can create shorter things, or you can create things like, you can get pretty intense. Like when we used to teach Django, I would run, you can have what we call aliases. And so in the same way that I can navigate from CD to desktop, Coding Dojo, Instruction CD, Nove, MERN, this is what I do for like our class. Let's say I'm here. This is literally what I do is now I just say MERN, and it will automatically, if I say PWD, it does the CD into here to here to here to here. And those are called aliases. They can become really, really, really fun, really, really nice. You can create really intense scripts. So if you're like wanting to, if I wanted to, like here, I had a web temp. So if I know I'm gonna have a class overview and I'm gonna have a main JS and I'm gonna do a bunch of stuff, I can actually just create a function with this, and this is super high level. So if you are interested, I'm happy to talk more about it, but don't stress out about it. You can Google aliases if you want, but you can do a whole bunch of stuff, and I can create a bunch of files and then open it up in VS Code. And so, like if I were to do that, let's say ls or cd into week, I'm just going to delete 3 here in a bit, and then I say mkcd lecture 1. I'm in lecture 1, and I say web temp. We can see that it's opening VS Code, and it should have a bunch of files already created for me. Yep. So I have my daily agenda, index HTML, and style CSS. So what it did is it went and I said web temp, and it said, okay, great. It ran touch index.html. So it created my HTML file. It said touch daily agenda.md. So it created that for me. It said touch style.css. And then it did code space period. And so it opened it up automatically. So if you're finding yourself doing the same thing over and over, creating an alias and using functions can be a really, really fast way to kind of make things less repetitive, which is sort of fun. And you can have fun with it too. You can kind of get intense with it. You can pass in parameters. And so if you're doing some sort of function, let's say that, back when we did Django, you would have to talk about your folder and then you'd have to do a second name. So in the same way that when I say mkcd space, if I go back and I say mkcd lecture 2, this lecture 2 is my parameter for my function, right? And so that is identified as $1. And if I have multiple, like let's say that I needed 2 names, I could say second one, that would be identified as $2. And so in my alias, I can add as much as I need. So if I know that I need a bunch of stuff, I need to CD into the first one, and then I CD into the second one. That's what all this does. So it creates everything. So it's a fun thing that if you have a little bit of time and you want to look into aliases, they can make your life really, really, really easy and much better. So any questions on any of that? Okay. Did I overwhelm anybody with the alias thing? Sometimes that's a hit or miss. The only thing with these is that if you create an alias, you just have to use the keyword of alias, what you want, like what your shortcut is. So whenever I had MERN, is like MERN. And then what do you want it to do? You just say equals, and then here's what you do. And so I have it for web fun, for programming basics, all kinds of stuff. If you're in Python and you're creating your environment or having to navigate into your environment, you can do that. Run server, instead of having to type this, I can just type RS and it did it for me. So just ways to make your life a little bit easier. Okay, great. Any questions on any of that? Okie doke. Awesome. The other thing I want to talk about today, let me get out of here. Let me actually open up what I need to open up. CD week 1, lecture 2. Oops, we already made 3. is I want to talk a little bit about destructuring. Destructuring is a way that we can pull some information out of those composite data types that we talked about. And so we're going to have, actually, let me stop the recording and then I will start it again. So that way it's kind of broken down.